Welcome to You Decide. I'm your host, Errol Lewis. The big news, and it's international news, is that 33-year-old Zohran Mamdani, an assemblyman, meaning he served in the lower house of the state legislature, has accomplished what seemed unthinkable just weeks ago. He defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary for mayor. This is big news. The victory seemingly came out of nowhere. Back in February, Mamdani was polling at 1%, and he went from 1% to 43% in victory in less than 6 months. That doesn't happen very often, folks. One reporter who was there and chronicled a lot of this and spotted the signs of this upset is our own Ayanna Harry. She was out on the campaign trail, pounding the pavement, giving up her weekends, running around after church, catching Andrew Cuomo and watching this all unfold. So we're going to look into what this all means, how it happened, and give you a look behind the scenes at the same time. Ayanna, thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So throughout the campaign, Andrew Cuomo was avoiding contact with the press.
Yes.
So actually take us behind the scenes of what it was like trying to cover it. Some days he wouldn't really tell you his schedule.
Correct.
Other days
Most
he wouldn't
days.
tell you. Yeah. So how do you make that happen?
Yeah, a lot of phone calls and a lot of advocating for access on behalf of NY1’s. So, I wake up in the morning and the first thing that I would do is call Andrew Cuomo's campaign and reiterate our interest in sitting down and speaking with him and having a one-on-one. Andrew Cuomo made the strategic decision, he and people in his campaign, that he wasn't going to be out there, that he wasn't going to, aside from, for the most part, going to churches on Sunday mornings, he wasn't going to be going to local parades and shaking a lot of hands. He wasn't showing up at subway stations or even forums where other candidates were going to be to share his platform with other people. So that did make getting access to Andrew Cuomo a bit of a challenge.
What do you think that was about? Was it them not telling you where they were going, or were they just not going?
At the end, they were not telling us where they were going, but at the beginning, they just were not going. And a source in the campaign told me, quite frankly, we bubble wrapped him way too much early on in the campaign. So I do think that they realized that there wasn't enough access. What's unclear to me is whether or not that was a decision from the campaign or a decision from Andrew Cuomo himself. And it may have been Andrew Cuomo feeling like this thing is in the bag. We have universal name recognition here in New York. Let's just not rock the boat and cruise to a victory on primary day.
Okay. I will say for the record, 3 different people very high up in the campaign promised me interviews with the candidate. I never got a chance to talk to Andrew Cuomo until we were in the debate and I had to ask him questions in front of everybody else. I don't know what that strategy was supposed to yield for them. Do you think this was him not wanting to be confronted or trying to just kind of cruise through and hope that nobody noticed? And then
I think he was trying to cruise through, hope that nobody noticed, but also he doesn't want to be confronted. Although I will say, when he has taken questions in gaggles with other reporters, and even, in my interviews with him, he does just okay on the tough questions. He knows how to handle himself. He's been doing this a very long time. I haven't seen a moment where someone asks him a tough question and he's stumped or really has a major misstep. He knows how to handle himself. And so I think, perhaps either he or the campaign should have had a little bit more confidence in putting him out there, letting him address the issues, answer the questions, and let the voters decide.
Right. He'll answer the question. It may not be smooth. It might not even be truthful, but he will give you an answer.
Yes.
What were the effects, do you think, of the super PAC? There was this outside group that raised, in the end, I think, well in excess of $20 million and spent it on his behalf. Did that seem to act maybe as a security blanket or a safety net for them?
I think there need to be several questions on whether or not that was money well spent. It seemed like they were spending money and running a campaign that might have been effective 20, 25 years ago, but wasn't going to be effective in the current political landscape that we have right now. So in terms of, the work that Fix the City did, lots of TV ads, lots of mailers. We know, unfortunately, here at Spectrum, we know folks are cutting the cable cord, right? Who's still going to the mailbox every day and checking. Look, everybody's paying for everything online. You got automatic pay. And at one point when we were out on the campaign trail with Andrew Cuomo, we did see a woman with a Cuomo for Mayor t-shirt and it said Fix the City under it. And he ran into her. It was a moment. But I really didn't see Fix the City launch a robust ground game to connect with New Yorkers, to get the message out there in a meaningful way. So a lot of money spent. But I don't know if it really translated well. And also, I think there was some backlash over how much money was being spent. I think that rubbed a lot of New Yorkers the wrong way. And the controversy over that mailer that never went out, but where Zohran Mamdani, his skin was darkened, his beard was lengthened. New Yorkers are pretty smart. When they hear that something like that is going on, it does rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah, at a very basic level, and I'm not, I've never been paid to be a strategist, but they were around 40% when they started as far as their approval. And then they spent millions of dollars and they were still around 40%. I would think that they would say, well, wait, we need to do something different because we just threw a ton of money into an advertising campaign that doesn't seem to have moved the needle.
Yeah, it just seemed like a really antiquated strategy and approach to campaigning. I don't recall seeing any Fix the City, social media ads. It just seemed like there needed to be volunteers, people out and about in the neighborhoods. If it wasn't going to be Andrew Cuomo, send other folks out there. And you know who did that and did it well? Zohran Mamdani,
Sure,
right? That's what he did for months. And that's part of I think, one of the key ingredients to his victory. So
yes, that's right. No, you got to find people where they are. I don't know about you, but for me, snail mail is for making sure I don't miss any bills or legal notices, like the water bill or something like that. It's mostly just defensive. Once in a blue moon, you get a greeting card from a relative, usually my older relatives.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm not looking for any real information.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Interesting.
And it doesn't engage with people. It doesn't speak to who you are, what you're going through. It's just a piece of paper in the mail. It's easy to throw out.
So primary night, the polls close at 9 o'clock. You were on site at the Cuomo headquarters at the Carpenters Union. At what point did you realize, whether they did or not, that this wasn't necessarily going to go their way?
Well, I realized it before we got to the Carpenters Union. The moment I personally felt that Zohran Mamdani was going to win this race was the day I covered the Mamdani AOC rally. I called my husband that night and I said, I think Zohran Mamdani is going to win. Just because the level of enthusiasm, not just the number of people, the level of enthusiasm, they were being so thoughtful and engaging folks, signing them up. Okay, which shifts will you be taking to canvass this week? So that was a moment when I thought Zohran Mamdani would do very, very well. I wasn't sure he would necessarily win on primary night. But I would say once we got to around 9:30 and numbers started to come in and they just didn't seem to move for Andrew Cuomo, I heard, no one's going to reach 50% tonight and we have to wait until, all of the ranked choice voting tabulations are factored in. I was hearing that and folks were trying to sound a little upbeat. And then Cuomo surprised us all and walked onto the stage and gave that concession speech. But I will say right before that, myself and several other people, we were speaking with, his campaign spokesperson and asking, is he even going to speak tonight? Because, we were starting to wonder how this would all unfold. But he surprised us. We were told, within the next hour. And then 2 minutes later, he just walked on the stage and gave that speech.
Well, I mean, this is the thing: is he really doesn't get managed, right? A lot of the people who are working for him are 10 years his junior, 20 years his junior, don't have nearly as much experience, and he kind of runs his own campaign to a certain extent.
Yeah.
This is it's usually considered a mistake, by the way, to do that, but he was definitely calling the shots.
And I could hear the frustration from campaign staffers at times that I think some of them did realize that it was hurting them by not working with the media, but not giving people, a heads up of where they'll be so that they can come out and get some video and interact with him. Zohran Mamdani is leading these newscasts because he's open and accessible, and they recognize that it was hurting them, but they also didn't have a vote.
What do you think it was about Mamdani's message that caught on? Or was it the message? How much of it was style? How much of it was the policy?
I think it was a factor of things. I think, one, the ground game, speaking to people. The first person to ask me about Zohran Mamdani, I had to think about it, was back in February. And I was like, wait a minute, how do you know about him? Like, what are you talking about? And then in March, I was asked about him again. And these are people who are not engaged in politics. They're not watching Inside City Hall, although they should be every day, Monday through Friday, 7 p.m., New York 1. But I was just, in fact, I was at a Cuomo campaign event, and I asked a gentleman there, can I interview you to talk about why you want to support Andrew Cuomo? And he whispered to me, he said, and this was a bishop, African-American bishop at a church out in Queens. He said, actually, I'm thinking about voting for Zohran Mamdani. Kind of whispered it, and that was back in March. So that's when I began to realize that they were having, not just knocking on people's doors, but they had a full script. And they were, talking to people, trying to understand what their issues were, and then being responsive with, what Zohran Mamdani would do to address those issues. So I think that was part of it. And this affordability issue in New York City. I mean, everyone knows, we all deal with it every single day. He just spoke to it in a way with vision, not talking about what he did in the past, in part because there's not a lot that he did in the past, but he really spoke with a vision that was clear, easy for people to understand, and I think that latched on. And then social media as well. I have gotten so many political videos, pro-Mamdani, coming up into my algorithm from people that I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're a political reporter or not. But these videos are really well done, and they're engaging. And I imagine other people who are also on social media, they were getting those videos as well.
Yeah, I noticed that when I interviewed him, and we interviewed all of the candidates, except for Cuomo, because he wouldn't sit down in here. But when you sort of put it out there on TikTok or on Instagram, one of the different platforms, his would always, as they say, perform better, meaning it would get, 8,000 looks, where this pretty much the same or the equivalent interview with one of the other candidates would get 800.
Right. I think the campaign engaged with people in person, so they already heard his name. There was a little bit of excitement, and then they see him come up on their feed, and then I think it kind of all continues to build on itself.
Okay, very interesting. Now, there was a lot of talk about how for Andrew Cuomo, the city is going to hell in a handbasket, meaning this was a rescue mission. That was kind of his fundamental
a message of fear
value proposition. And, what I've been saying all along was, okay, what if you don't particularly feel fearful? In which case, then what do you need him for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, look, sometimes everybody feels fearful sometimes, but if you can't pay your basic bills, you feel that every single day.
Yes.
So, right away, you get a leg up if you're Mamdani. You're talking about what people are experiencing every day as opposed to what some people feel some of the time.
Absolutely. And I think, continuing to talk through this position of fear and not providing anything hopeful for folks, not giving people something to look forward to. I do think that was in many ways a misstep. And this is 2025. The politics of 2025 is different from the politics of 2022. So, and the city is changing rapidly.
I mean, there was all of this talk after last year's elections about how, New York is moving to the right. And, because Trump did marginally better in a lot of neighborhoods than he had before. And it was of some interest to some Republicans because it was, it was Asian neighborhoods, it was some Latino neighborhoods. And it's like, okay, well, that's, take whatever you want from that and work it however you want. But people were drawing, I thought, very broad conclusions about New York moving to the right. I don't think Mamdani's victory means New York is moving to the left. It means a really talented candidate with a really good organization and a message that sold well happened to win an election. I don't know if I would go much further than that.
I agree. Also looking back at the election results in November, a lot of Democrats in New York City stayed home. So I don't necessarily think that this was a message that Republicans are doing great. I think it was a message that Democrats were dissatisfied with their options. And so in November, they just chose to do something different on that Tuesday as opposed to going out and voting. And it's just been so interesting to see all of the national and international attention on this race and folks trying to understand, where is this party of Democrats going? Who do we invest in? Who should be the next round of candidates?
We did something for the other show, The Big Deal, on South Asian voters. And we did it from a national perspective. And it was actually the first of our segments to legitimately go viral, 10,000 views overnight, kind of thing. And it was, it was an indicator. I'm like, this is a dynamic community that probably doesn't hear its concerns talked about. And so a lot of people looked at it. We did a segment on primary night, as a matter of fact, in the early part of the show, where we brought in some of the strategists from the Muslim Democratic Club and so forth. And sort of similar thing, that there's a dynamic, explosive entry into politics by immigrants. I've seen it before. I've seen it when we call them Russians, but they're actually Ukrainians down in Brighton Beach. Finally started getting elected. That's like 20 odd years ago. I saw it with John Liu, first Asian American to win citywide office. And I just watched the excitement in all kinds of, he's from Taiwan, but people from Korea, people from mainland China, people from everywhere just flocked to him. I mean, it was amazing to watch. And I'm seeing this with the South Asian communities.
Absolutely.
They are flocking to Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, and I think in part, some of the rhetoric from, for example, Fix the City, that draft mailer, it had a very negative backlash within those communities. Some of my friends who are South Asian, Muslim, they say to me, I feel like Zohran Mamdani is continuing to get a certain line of questioning only because he is brown and he is Muslim. And so I do think that there was some mobilizing behind Zohran Mamdani, in part because he was a voice, he was active representation, listening to communities' needs, but also people felt like, we need to step up. This is our moment. This man is under attack simply because of who he is, and it's not right.
Yeah. And since we're on the subject of sort of the tribal politics that make up New York politics, when it comes to black votes, and I kind of gave him a little grief for this. I'm like, Mr. Mamdani, you were born in Uganda. You majored in Africana Studies. And for some reason, you're getting absolutely nowhere with black voters.
And his middle name is Kwame, named after Kwame
middle name
Nkrumah.
Kwame Nkrumah. Right. And yet, he doesn't seem to have the kind of organic connection that he has to a lot of other communities, or at least nothing comparable to Cuomo's, and who apparently, according to the New York Times, I think had the numbers, outperformed Mamdani by 20 points in black communities. You saw him at a lot of churches.
I did.
Cuomo did.
I did see Andrew Cuomo at a lot of churches, and there was a warm reception to him, but I do think that, even within black churches, there is a real generational divide, right? I don't know if we're seeing younger black New Yorkers in the churches every single Sunday, particularly after COVID, where, there's a lot of bedside Baptists at this point. People are watching virtually. It's just a new way. So going to church, being in service every single Sunday, I think there is a generational divide. And I will say, I have seen black younger New Yorkers excited about Zohran Mamdani. So I think he hasn't made full inroads. And it's tough because you're talking about folks who perhaps Andrew Cuomo and his father before him have been coming and visiting their churches for generations. Perhaps when he was governor, he helped with funding for the church to, open up a school or launch a project. So there is a long history there. And part of, I think, the connection that Andrew Cuomo has with black churches is during COVID-19, he really focused on churches as a mechanism to give out PPE, hand sanitizer. That's where a lot of the early COVID testing sites were set up in communities, were in churches. So I think because of that, people who have a close relationship with your church community, they felt like, he was there for us. If I needed a COVID test, I just went to my church. And so I think that's part of that connection. But, it's hard to keep that relationship going.
Well, and as you point out, I mean, just on any given Sunday, church attendance is going to skew female and it's going to skew older.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what Cuomo was relying on. Let's talk a little bit about where things head next. This November, the general election, we know now that Mamdani, or we're fairly sure that Mamdani is going to be the Democratic nominee. He will have the Working Families Party line. I can't see them taking that away from him at this point. We already have a Republican nominee. That's been settled. It's going to be Curtis Sliwa. In theory, Cuomo could continue because they created an independent line, right? I don't think for a minute that he's going to do that. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's highly, highly unlikely. This was a pretty decisive loss for Andrew Cuomo. And we're seeing Democrats consolidate behind Zohran Mamdani pretty quickly. I mean, messages of congratulations coming in from Bill Clinton, Hakeem Jeffries, Kathy Hochul. Those are some pretty moderate names all stepping up to congratulate him. So if Democrats in New York are standing behind Zohran Mamdani come November, I think it's going to be pretty tough for Andrew Cuomo to, siphon away votes from Democrats, and there's not enough. It'd be a tough path to rely on Republicans and independents.
It is such a tough business. I mean, I was talking to you live while the evening was proceeding, and something I always get tickled by is that if somebody's a winner, everybody's piled up on the stage around them like they were just there all along. When in reality, you and I know, they're actually waiting in a car around the corner. They're looking at the results and trying to figure out whose headquarters they're going to go to. Yeah,
and a lot of those folks did not get out of the car in Lower Manhattan in the West Village for Andrew Cuomo's. I mean, there became a moment where I was like, wait a minute, where's Congressman Espaillat? Where's Rodney Spachat? where is everyone? All these people who called for him to resign 4 years ago, then turned around and endorsed him and were out in their neighborhoods and communities fighting for him. Mm-hmm. Where are they?
Gone.
Yeah.
Gone. Let's talk a little bit about winners and losers. This is one of my favorite parts of this kind of thing, meaning other than the people who are on the ballot, right? My first winner, Muslim Democratic Club. Coming up, big winners. I mean, when they first formed, I think it was about 8 years ago, and they asked me to moderate a forum at NYU for all of the candidates that year. I think it was 2013. And it was interesting to me. I thought it was a great idea for them to, if you're not getting served by your local club, form your own club. That's the way it goes. And now Zohran Mamdani, a former board member of this club, Ali Najmi, his attorney, who's a member of that club, they hit one out the park.
Yes. I firmly agree with you.
Yeah. Electoral alliances come up a winner, right? I mean, the connection with Brad Lander, even though it hasn't, quote unquote, been activated because we haven't done the ranked choice calculation, but it really was crucial. And it was probably what convinced Andrew Cuomo, there's nothing here for me. It's time to go home.
Yeah, I call it the bromance between, Zohran Mamdani and Brad Lander. You see the two of them riding down the street on city bikes. They're sitting up with Stephen Colbert. I think that gave a lot of New Yorkers some comfort, perhaps people who were a little worried about voting for Zohran Mamdani and where his, views land in terms of Israel, to see Brad Lander, a very, proud Jewish New Yorker, someone serving in elected office, saying, this guy, we may not agree on everything, but this guy is good with me, same as John Liu did. I think that, gave some people a little permission to go ahead and vote for Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, Brad Lander came up as a big winner, although it was, it's kind of hard. You could read on his face how crushed he was.
Yes.
That he didn't do better, that he didn't win, that he gave up what was essentially a safe seat as city controller, and is now going to be not quite on the outside looking in. Actually, he could probably get whatever position he wants.
I see in the first deputy mayor, Brad Lander, wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Although, or senior advisor.
Yeah.
Or maybe a commissioner. Maybe you don't want to be in City Hall, right? It's going to be kind of funky down there. I can tell you that for now. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh, huge win for her.
Yeah.
This goes to show that, there have been questions. Does she have this huge national appeal, but then not have the real pull here at home in New York City? That question has been answered. Yes, she does. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Losers. The entire campaign leadership. Melissa DeRosa, Rich Azzopardi, Charlie King, Steve Cohen at the IE, Liz Benjamin at the IE. All of the people who were supposed to be the brain trust making this thing happen. Yeah,
it's a new day in New York City politics, and we have to continue to evolve, all of us. And I think that campaign, it felt like just an antiquated campaign that they were running.
Yeah, indeed. And I would also have as a loser, money in politics, right?
Yeah. Oh, wait, but I have one more winner. Can I throw one in?
Yeah, please.
I think young voters in New York City.
Yes.
Young voters in New York City.
Yes. And by young, we mean like what, under 30?
Under 30. Under 30.
Where you, I don't know how old you are, but where are you drawing the line here, young lady?
I guess let's say Gen Z voters.
Okay.
Let's say Gen Z voters. I mean, just being out and about in the field, and I just seen so many young people, Gen Z folks, volunteering, activating, getting engaged. I mean, when I was at the Working Families Party rally on Sunday, and it was hot outside.
Yes.
And they were lined up down the block, around the corner, waiting to go inside. And again, I called my husband. I was like, I think young voters are going to teach the city a lesson about their power in this election. So I do think that young voters are a big part of why Zohran Mamdani did so well.
And it's interesting because the question then becomes, will they aim that kind of concentrated force at whatever target comes along, or was Andrew Cuomo uniquely a figure who represented the last 40 years of politics so that they could really just take a swipe at all of it at once?
I think it was in part Cuomo, but I think a lot of it was just Zohran Mamdani really spoke to them and inspired them and gave them something that they felt like, because I think being against Cuomo doesn't necessarily inspire you to go out and register if you've never registered before or vote in a primary if you've never voted in a primary before. So I do think that Zohran Mamdani, he does have a bit of a star quality to him. Remember, he was a rapper and, I think he has a star quality, and I think that all factored in.
Yeah, no question about it. I went back and looked at my interview. It's still kicking around on the web. Maybe I'll post it for the podcast. Of shortly after he won in 2020, he was one of the pandemic candidates. So in July, I think it was July 29th, 2020, I'm sitting in my living room doing the broadcast, and I'm interviewing for the first time. And I just noticed something that I haven't seen very often, which is that he's charismatic, he's charming, he's glib, he's funny. There are a lot of people who are like that. A lot of politicians can do that. He can sort of send it through the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy, that's something. He's on to something here. And I remember telling him, I mean, it's in the interview. I told him one of the first things I said is like, he had said in his tweet after he won, it was still Twitter back then, and he said, socialism won. And I was like, don't sell yourself short, young man. You're a pretty good politician. Like that is not absent from this, and I think that's still true now. Yes, young people. Any other winners? Let's get to these other losers.
Not that come to mind right now.
I mean, Working Families Party.
Yeah. Working Families Party. Big winners.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say and it's odd and it's a concept, but I'd still call it a loser. Lack of mentorship. Lack of elite mentorship.
Yes, we could talk about for generations in New York City politics. It's like folks get into office and they just want to stay there forever and they don't do a good job of mentoring the next generation. Yeah. And then it usually winds up hurting communities. So absolutely lack of mentorship. That is a chronic issue. And that's why we see so often young candidates who are running for the first time come along and sweep in with an upset.
Right. Exactly. And in connection with that, the county bosses, the county chairs in Queens, Gregory Meeks. This is a guy out of your county, and you couldn't give him the time of day, and he still beat you and won Queens. Manhattan, where we had Keith Wright. Yep. Same thing. He didn't just win; he won the whole borough. Yeah. And that ain't good. Rodney Pichot-Hermelin in Brooklyn, same deal. Yep. Zohran Mamdani won Brooklyn, and the county leader, who gave him no consideration whatsoever, lined up behind Andrew Cuomo in exchange for what? Probably nothing, right? Yeah. I mean, in fact, you were I remember that's right. You were moderating the Black Agenda meeting at Medgar Evers College that turned into a complete spectacle in a zoo. It did. And it was all of these black local politicians, a lot of the district leaders and so forth, all there basically to sort of support Andrew Cuomo. Did any kind of Black Agenda even get discussed that night? Anybody who was involved with that, I put them on the losers list. But.
Yeah, well, I did ask the question, so I did steer the question towards that issue. But you remind me of one thing that I forgot about. Part of the reason why we didn't see Andrew Cuomo out on the campaign trail more is because he wanted to avoid being protested. Right. There was a huge protest, and police were on the stage, knocking people off. Well, not knocking, but it was a little forceful.
Yeah. Paperboy Prince was
removal.
there.
Yeah. But there was a group of people who you saw storm the stage, and even when we were out on the campaign truck with Andrew Cuomo in Upper Manhattan, 90% of the people were excited to see him, but there were a couple of people who were like nasty. One man said, "You're the reason why my mother died from COVID." Another man kept following the truck for blocks and blocks and blocks, saying 13 women. Wow. So like a very, very positive, but also very, very negative whenever he was out in public. And I think that's probably also a reason why we didn't see him out more.
Yeah, I mean, right. There's nothing to kill the vibe. If you're out there trying to talk about your vision for the future and then somebody comes up and says, "You killed my mother." Yeah. Oh, that's
there's no
comeback for that one. Yeah. So what's next? We've got the November election coming up, and the chances of Eric Adams, I would have thought before the primary, okay, he's going to be competitive. He's got a chance. But to me, the contours and the dimensions and the numbers of the Zohran Mamdani victory and him as the Democratic nominee, I'm much less certain about Eric Adams' chances at this point.
Yeah, I think he's going to really have a steep hill to climb. New Yorkers are a little fed up with Eric Adams, and there are various reasons for different people. I have a relative who was a strong Eric Adams supporter, and when he was indicted, she cried. Other people got upset around the ways in which the federal case was dropped. Some people are just tired of seeing him on Instagram in a hookah shop or, doing a live stream with highly problematic social media influencers. Right. So it would be tough. And there's all these questions about his relationship with President Donald Trump, the Trump administration, his first deputy mayor, Deputy Mayor Kaz Daughtry for Public Safety, his relationship with Tom Homan, the Trump administration. When New Yorkers look at what's happening nationally, they see the protests, and knowing that the mayor seems to be aligned with that, I think it's going to be tough for New Yorkers to come behind him.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is one of the underlying forces in Democratic politics, it seems to me, in New York right now, which is opposition to Trump. I mean, it shows up in the polls.
Yeah.
They talked about it in the debates, to me, almost to a fault, where I was doing the controllers debate. And there's, I want to ask them about pension funds and returns and all this stuff. And they're saying, we have to Trump-proof the city, and I know they're saying it because their polls and their experience in the street and campaigning told them that that's what people want to hear. That's what Democrats want to hear. Donald Trump is one of the best organizing principles for New York Democrats that you can imagine. And Eric Adams is not necessarily on the right side of that.
Agreed.
Yeah. He might also want to, maybe look at the Cuomo experience and rethink some of his policies of ducking the press, insulting the press, antagonizing the press, and otherwise, kind of...
I think that would be it seems like that would be difficult for the mayor. I can't speak for him, but...
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he's all I can say is, look at what just happened with Andrew Cuomo. I mean, I saw him, the mayor, Eric Adams, was on Fox News the day after the primary, and he was kind of spitting out the same rhetoric, saying we have somebody who has no record, he's not right for New York, I've got a record, and I was like...
Right. And 2 weeks ago,
just spent $20 million saying all of that, and Democratic voters at least were like...
completely turned off.
No, we're good. Yeah.
And 2 weeks ago, Eric Adams at his off-topic Q&A was slamming Andrew Cuomo and spoke relatively positively of Zohran Mamdani.
We shall see. Well, this is the scenario he wanted, right?
Yes.
I think it was pretty clear. A lot of the strategists said, I heard it from the inside, that this is the one. He wants to run against the socialist. I'm like, okay, you sure about that?
Right.
I don't know if you caught it because you were out in the field, but Ali Najmi gave a great quote. He said, I want to say to Eric Adams and his whole organization, you are not ready for us. Just talking smack.
Yeah.
So. Anyhow, we've got a lot more work to get to. Let's all get some sleep, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks so much for spending some time here.
Thank you for having me, Errol.
Do you want more conversations with the people who are shaping the future of New York City and beyond? Check out our New York One podcast channel in the description. And hit subscribe to let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues